Hey, Tech Intersect listeners, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm really excited to welcome Ohm Shah to the show. We had a chance to meet at Crypto for the Culture a couple of weeks ago. Shout out to Lisa and Nina over at Crypto Tutors for having an incredible event. It just brought so many fantastic people and industry trailblazers, leaders, and stalwarts who are really invested in protecting the space so that it is safe for consumers, for investors, but also really supports innovation in a meaningful way. And I had a chance to hear Om speak about um, his business. He's the co-founder of Wallet Guard, a company that's dedicated to defeating scams throughout Web3 with expertise in cybersecurity and business and software engineering. He previously served as a security consultant at Accenture and focused on offensive security, not offensive like you should take offense, but offensive like being on the offense, if I'm not mistaken. He will explain that in a moment. But he is now, as I said, the co-founder of Wallet Guard. We will talk about all of that and more in a moment. But first, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. Well, this is going to help a lot of people. I recently released a book called Digital Money Demystified, and one of the most important chapters for me is kind of confronting the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around security, but also right sizing the conversation to be very transparent. There, anytime you have a honeypot of money, or you have something where people have a little bit of information, but also starting to feel FOMO, the fear of missing out, being constantly bombarded with FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that I wanted to speak to folks like you who are building solutions that focus on being prepared, not scared. That's the way that I describe it. So before we kind of look under the hood a bit, can you give us an overview of Wallet Guard and how it aims to protect users within the Web3 ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to kind of explain the product in the most analogous way to like Web 2 is we are very much like an antivirus to your wallet. So if your wallet or your browser is the operating system of Web 3, right, installing MetaMask, etc., Wallet Guard is your antivirus. We're going to keep you safe from malicious transaction and malicious websites. The whole idea is we provide a multi-layered defense where we tell you exactly what's going to happen on every single transaction and then also provide risk warnings and assessments there. But then we also proactively block scam links like wallet drainers and all those types of things proactively by detecting malicious code prior to you visiting the website.
It's such a it's not simplistic, but it sounds elegant. It's an elegant solution to very, very real problems. This is something I'm very concerned about as I looked at the price of Bitcoin and ETH, for example, and they're both having a moment, darling. They are having a moment. I'm cautiously
Absolutely.
optimistic. This is not, legal or financial advice, but anytime you see the surge in prices, whether it's a blip or the beginning of the next bull run, that's going to bring all the scammers to the yard and also a lot of new entrants as well. So, what types of scams should investors be most aware of right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several. So, like for your average Joe who's getting into the space, who might be like on Coinbase and stuff like that, the biggest types of scams that those types of people see are typically either one like phishing through so there's a method of phishing called spear phishing where it's a little bit more targeted than traditional phishing. And
Mm,
the unfortunate instance here is CoinTracker had a third-party service breach. So CoinTracker is the tax service that Coinbase uses. And so CoinTracker had a third-party data breach. So people's emails got leaked and other types of stuff. So now this contact information for crypto users who are on Coinbase is out there. So now, being, let's say, put yourselves in the shoes of a malintent actor, right? They would be like, hey, look at all these emails for Coinbase customers. Let me just come up with a Coinbase phishing email based on what Coinbase normally looks like. And, those are really the targeted, like whether it's fix some ETH here or and we'll double it, send it back. Those are your traditional types of scams. But then,
mhm.
you dive a little bit deeper into the self custodial world and you start interacting with dApps and stuff that's a lot more exciting, but a lot more scary too at the same time because people don't know what they're doing. And oftentimes, what happens is people will end up using MetaMask and not having a way to kind of verify a transaction. And what they're doing is they're essentially signing a blank check. They don't know what they're
Mm,
signing. They think they know what they're signing. And, in most cases where people are like, I went to a website and I got hacked and I lost all my funds, I didn't do anything. It's typically not the case. They typically sign something where they didn't understand, where they thought it was normal, and then they end up losing all their assets. So that's kind of exactly why we've engineered the product the way we have to make it super
mhm.
simple because we're a browser extension that complements whatever wallet you're using.
That's really fascinating because there are all of these different types of wallets and so many, when I think of the user experience and the inexperience of users, that's kind of the perfect storm of why a solution like yours is so critically important. And I love very much the way that you describe it as the kind of the antivirus for this, for wallets because it's an essential part of engaging in Web3. Whether you're buying crypto, I was about to say, I guess it's fair to say now, a traditional crypto asset. I mean, imagine a world where we can actually say that, right? Ones that have been around since 2009 or 2015. And even though, we have this huge proliferation of coins and tokens topping probably over 40,000 at this point, and not even including all of the non-fungible tokens, it is critically important as a matter of digital hygiene, digital safety, to have multi-layered protection for products like this in any Web3 environment, but in particular, engaging in cryptographically secured assets. Talk about, you kind of touched a bit on it, but some of the common, well, you've kind of talked a bit about some of the common vulnerabilities that scammers exploit and the mitigation of those risks. Talk also about some of the psychological tactics. Um, I'm playing, for example, whack-a-mole because so many fakers and scammers are trying to trade on my name, my reputation, my image. They've automated it, so for every 10 that I or my team knocks out, there's 100 more coming because they're lazy and it's automated. There's a psychology or psychological tactics that scammers use. So, what are some of those things that folks should be um, aware of?
Yeah, so I think the most one of the most common things that might be misunderstood or not understood widely is that a majority of hacks or exploits start with some form of phishing. Like the stat in Web 2 is like I think 98%, right? So like
Wow.
2% like some really critical exploits that people are able to, hackers are able to do stuff without without your behest or without any kind of knowledge of you. But in most cases it's some sort of phishing email, something that starts the whole chain of the attack. So phishing is like a hugely psychological thing because um, there are several ways to do it, right? So depending on how much information, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the spear phishing. Spear phishing is
Hmm.
like, hey, I have a bit more information about you, so I can be a lot more targeted in the way that I try to get stuff from you. So yesterday we saw something with Bittrex. So Bittrex had like, how Bittrex closed down their U.S. operations, and they sent an email not so long ago that said, hey, if you're a U.S. customer, you should withdraw your assets. We are going to be shutting down services in the U.S., which was legitimate, right? But what these scammers did was they preyed on the psychology of that whole fear aspect. Hey, I might have money locked up. But see, a lot of people maybe had money locked up or they didn't. But the idea was for these scammers is like reach out, be like, hey, you have $3,000, $3,098.30 like locked up in this account. Make sure you withdraw it. And then now there's a link. And see, this is all about social engineering. Like, what can I do? What kind of call to actions, what kind of emotions can I invoke? Oh shit, I have
Mm,
$3,000 that I forgot to
right,
remove. Let me go do that. Let me click on this. Let me not look at the sender of this email. Let me not look at where this link is actually sending me, right?
right,
And unfortunately, that's the reaction, and that's what they're going after. At the end of the day, a lot of this cybersecurity stuff is psychological warfare, right? It's about how can I trick someone to do something that they normally wouldn't do? How can I build
right.
trust and rapport with someone into like getting them to do something? So like I've had friends that have been like so a lot of board apes for example like high value NFT assets where they'll be befriended for months, right, by like some other NFT individual, and then eventually that person will make their ask or that send them that
Mm,
link that ends up getting them, right? And that is the scariest part about Web3 because you truly don't know who you're interacting with. And, the safest way is to be trustless, but, sometimes that's not always the most convenient or the most fun, but, it's better safe than sorry.
Yeah, it makes me think of all of the new entrants into the space where so many people are not going to spend the time probably that you and I might spend sitting down, having cold storage, um, measuring three times to cut once, because once you send, you spend, regardless if it's going to hit the right wallet, right? So I mean, I never have any music on. It requires full time and attention, even for those who know better, right? Because we both know people who quote unquote know better who got caught out there, were
Yeah,
scammed
Kevin
and
Rose.
moving too fast, too soon, or doing many of the things that we're talking about. And you're just one click away. You're just one, I had someone on the show a couple of weeks ago, Laura Bell Main, who
Mhm.
reminded me and the audience that we have to be right every single time in defending, right? And you know this because you're in cybersecurity. Scammers, hackers, they only have to be right once. But she also mentioned, I'm interested in your thoughts, they tend to be lazy. So it's kind of like, I
Yeah,
think of the very rough analogy of somebody walking down the street, testing all of the car doors. And it's like, they're not going to be interested in smashing the window, but if your door is open, they're coming in. What are your thoughts about that?
that's such a great point because it's like, they say like one of the biggest things about like cybersecurity is be harder to hack than the next person, to your person to the right,
Right.
right? At the end of the day, it's like hackers are lazy, right? And software engineers, the principle of being a good software engineer is actually being a lazy software engineer because you've automated stuff and you became like a good software engineer because you've automated so much. And part of this whole principle is that like these scammers, they're they're reusing tactics because they work. They might not work on you, but they might work on the person to your right, you know?
Mm,
And it's like it's a low-hanging fruit at the moment where it's easy for them to target and continue to target because it still works, unfortunately. And we're moving towards like, for example, in the case of like WalletGuard, we would have said, hey, this is a malicious transaction. You're sending your assets, you're not receiving anything in return. You're doing all these things. And I think that clarity is what's kind of missing because like a lot of the things you have to think about is it really a problem or a fault of the end user, or is it a fault of the mechanisms that we're using right now or the interfaces we're using right now? Because like I think the biggest problems to adoption right now are like security and UI UX because people don't
right.
understand what they're doing, right? Like MetaMask is not intuitive. As much as I love their team, as much as I love what they're building, it's not an intuitive program. Like right off the bat. Like I was talking to my barber earlier today. Like I'm like, hey, you should download MetaMask, because she said she was like trying to move her crypto off of Cash App, and I'm like, okay, download MetaMask. I'll be there. You can text me. I can help you out. And it's not intuitive. It's not so easy to just get people onboarded in a snap, right? And I think when people rush to a lot of people come into the space to make money, right? And that mentality is what ends up getting them scammed or rugged at the end of the day. So
Right.
I think the best cautionary tale I can give is that like think twice before you make an action and like breathe. Like I think a lot of people rush to decisions, and I get it. FOMO is like a big part of the industry, right? But
Huge.
if people were to take a breath and just like calm down for a second and like think about what they're about to do, I think a lot of times things could be avoided. But at the end of the day, these interfaces don't really tell you what's happening. So like we need to move towards a world where it's more like an ATM, right? It's like when you interact with an ATM, you know what you're getting, what you're receiving, what what kind of transactions happening, and that exactly is, in my opinion, like how you're going to start beginning to solve this problem of people not understanding what's happening behind the hood, right? And once you start breaking these things down in layman's terms, then obviously things start to click for people. And I think that's what we're moving towards. I think a lot of wallets and a lot of people have I understood this problem is like you need to tackle this at the UI UX level too before you even
Hmm.
try to think about all the technical solutions, because sometimes and this is something that we were like talking about internally as a team, that like do we build like a better way to detect something, or do we just figure out how to make the UI perceive it better for the end user?
Mm.
And this like whole concept is like a trade-off, right? Like you can create like really 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 technical security solutions, but if it doesn't make sense intuitively on the front end, then what's the point at all?
Absolutely. Because when you think about, you know, cypherpunks as, and obviously there were digital assets that predate Bitcoin, but it was that novel combination, consensus, peer-to-peer, internet, obviously cryptography, that really sealed the deal for to kind of avoid the double spend, right? But that was all done by highly technical folks who were hell bent and necessarily so on financial privacy, on autonomy, self sufficiency, and thus the child is born, right? Where finance and tech have a baby and we call it crypto. But that is like a microcosm of two microcosms where most people don't speak that language. And it was such a huge failure, I think, on the part of the industry that on one hand to talk about mass adoption, but to not understand that the majority of people do not speak this language. The majority of people are not going to sit around for 3 hours trying to move, even in for the hope of autonomy and self-sufficiency and financial privacy. We have entire kind of two generations at this point who are used to free 99 or freemium options or clicking to get easy access. And that's not the fault of the generations, it's just the nature of where people are. So being able to, as you talk about, and for those who don't know, UI UX is user interface and user experience. It has to be as simple as the solutions that are already available that we know that the crypto path is a better one in the long term, even though it's a nascent asset class. It has a lot of maturing to do, but people won't get to the benefits if they are tripped up over the problems. And so, as an educator, as a professor, someone who works with people in the space, I know the importance of community and education, and not a one-off experience, but just the constant evolution because there's always something else to learn. So, talk to me about the importance for you of people working in community to figure this out, the solutions and also engagement. So, community and education.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. Funny enough, I gave a talk on how education won't solve security. So it's a little bit of a controversial take, but I say this from being an educator. We host weekly Twitter spaces. We get out in the community. We're doing
Mm,
grassroots like Discord security sessions, talking to customers, understanding their problems, addressing these concerns. And like from being an educator, I've realized that education doesn't solve security alone, but it's a combination of both where it's education and tooling. So not
mhm,
only is it like, we built a product, for example, called Chat Web3. So right now, if you're using the transaction, like if you're using our extension, when you get the transaction window that pops up, there's a thing that says Ask Chat Web3. And what you can do is you can actually contextualize your transaction and start asking questions directly about the
mm,
transaction itself. Like, what is slippage? What am I doing on this transaction? Is this a bridge? Like, those types of questions. Now you can start layman's interacting and asking questions, like kind of like in a condensed GPT like interface but for
mhm,
your transaction. So it's a really cool way to kind of like educate and onboard. But the thing is, what I've learned is a lot of people don't care about the education as much as they should. They just care
right.
about the ease of use and the convenience. So like there are definitely trade-offs. Like, there were security features that we wanted to build like prior, but then we didn't want to build because we were like, this might be too much of like a reach of like, like secure user privacy or whatever. But at the end of the day, this would like 10x their security, right? And it comes to the point where it's like, what do users care about more? Do they care about being secure and having a convenient interface? Or do they care about the one technicality that, hey, this could be slightly more risky, but at the end of the day, they go for what product makes the most sense. What is like what's the easiest and most convenient for them to use? And that's where I've kind of always seen that narrative kind of shift. And I'm like really interesting. And one of the points that I think is really interesting about like the future here is like I'm sure you heard of friend tech, right? And social fi and all this type of stuff. Um, so what's really interesting is that they're using these things called application layer wallets. So application layer wallets are essentially like hey, you have a wallet made for your Frontech account, essentially, and you can load it up, and now you can use that on Frontech without having to do all these signatures, without having to do all
Mm-hmm.
these things. It's like, so these application layer wallets, in my opinion, are kind of the future. It's like this is what we're gonna move towards from like an adoption standpoint. Like you probably will have the ability to connect your wallet to dApps, but you will also probably have the ability to load up your dApp wallet or something along those lines because it'll allow for a more seamless experience. And I think that's what we're going to move towards because think about like, using Friendtech, but being able to load up your balance with Apple Pay because you're just loading up
Mm-hmm.
like a wallet, a digital wallet on that app, right? And I think a lot of this stuff is going to move that towards that. And I think once we do that, you're abstracting a lot of the complexity away from end users. So it's actually, it could be a net positive, but then there's also security implications that fall on the company to practice really good standards to manage or first off create those types of wallets because they don't necessarily have to have access to the seed phrase or the private key of the wallet
Right.
they've created. They could create it and then wash their hands of it. But it's going to really come down to the security practices that people practice here. But I think it's just really interesting because the idea of adoption only happens when you've created such a simple product or such a simple way to interact, right? And I think these application layer wallets are like a prime example of like how you're going to start abstracting away a lot of like, hey, you need a self-custodial wallet to interact with this dApp to do all these things. And like the best way
Mm-hmm.
to think about it too is like gaming, right? Like imagine being able to load up like a wallet on a gaming or a game,
Right.
and now you're able to do like pick up loot items and all this stuff, and you don't have to sign any transactions, right? Because who wants to sign transactions in the middle of gameplay? So I think
Right.
it's going to be really interesting for like the adoption perspective.
That's fascinating. I'm really excited about this. I was taking a look at your roadmap, and with, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, with Wallet Guard currently being free, and you've started to talk a bit about the long-term vision, and I think that it's very, very prudent to give people what they want, not even what they need right now, but what they literally want to enter the space. And
Hmm.
then I mean, that's kind of Apple's approach, right? They're not into really selling computers. They are into acquiring and keeping customers in their ecosystem, right? So we'll give you that phone or device for free, but eventually the front is going to crack, and then you're going to want it to talk to your computer, and so that it's creating the next solution and not giving everybody everything at once. I've actually made that mistake early when I founded the Advantage Evans Academy. It's an online onboarding space, content community, coaching, right? And I feel like being a law professor, I basically built out an entire law school, but for people who weren't in law. It's like, can we just get this? Because if you give them too much, it's actually so frustrating and they think it's their fault and then they fall away. So it's a long way around. I just wanted to kind of give that and give encouragement to folks that you will have the next right thing. But we begin with Wallet Guard. We begin with uh, this tool that will keep you safer. It's free, but what's the long-term vision for the product and for the company and ultimately for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main goals, like what we pitched our investors early on, is that we want it to be an end-to-end security suite. So what that meant to us was building kind of like in the way that an antivirus built, right? So
Mm,
next thing for us is like, adding things like ad blockers natively to the extension, types of things like, because like for example, there's a common scam method where they'll promote like a fake link above like the real link for a website. For example, OBS, like if you're familiar with NFT God or Alex Finn, I think his name is.
mm,
But basically, he went and he searched something. He said he searched ODS instead of OBS, which is like a recording software to stream. And
ah,
then the promoted link came up, and then he downloaded malware, and then got all his crypto jacked. And
ugh,
that could have been solved by having an ad blocker, right? So like integrating things like that natively into the extension is something that we're looking into. Like, how do we create such an experience where it feels like a suite of security tools rather than just these
mm-hmm.
features that pretty crucial, right? So from the monetization perspective and all that, like we also built out this whole security dashboard so people can go and run wallet health assessments. So it's like dashboard.walletguard.app, and you can go connect your wallet, run a scan, and what we'll do is we'll take a look at your past 500 transactions, take a look at your, do you have any honeypot tokens? Do you, is your wallet's up to date? All those types of things. And we help you
Mm,
manage your, security hygiene and posture. So like thinking about how do you gamify that? How do you create artificial constraints? For example, hey, you can only run scans on one wallet. But if you want to run on more than one wallet, then, maybe upgrade to premium. So the idea is freemium model, right? Like
mm-hmm.
you want to have like a free tier, but you also like with the issue with monetization, especially in the security space, it's like such a tricky subject because it's like obviously I don't want people to get scammed, right? That's the entire intention of what we're building, but
Right.
same time, the company's got to become profitable. It's got to become like a sustainable and scalable business model. So the only way you do that is, certain features that are like the biggest features, you have to kind of like, put behind paywalls. So like, for example, transaction simulation, like, you might be able to do like 20 per month for free. But then if you're like a power user of the blockchain, then you should upgrade because then you can
Right.
simulate more transactions and do all that type of stuff. So, but we're definitely going to be moving towards like a subscription based model. We're estimating somewhere around late Q1, maybe mid Q2 is really when we're thinking about when we're going to turn on monetization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, we're not looking to be outrageous either, right? So it's like we're thinking somewhere between the area of $5 to $8 a month. Right now, leaning towards $8 a month. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea is to find the right threshold because I think when it comes to monetization, it's very much like a journey and not like a sprint, right? It's like you have to
Right.
figure out what resonates with your customers, what converts the best, and like these are all, the business sided like mindsets. But for when it comes to consumers and like what we're looking to build for consumers is really the best security product the only security product you'll need in Web3 is really what we're trying to go after. So and we really think we're trying to do that through like an ecosystem approach. So we've also built a thing called the MetaMask Snap. So MetaMask has recently became like an app store. We are one of the 30 apps available on that app store. We are one of their
Mm,
launch partners. So we're actually the number one security app within MetaMask right now. And what you're able to do is you're actually able to install us directly within MetaMask and all those and you make a risky approval, I can send you a notification to your MetaMask directly to go revoke that approval. So
mm.
creating like an ecosystem of security products that talk to each other is really something that we've been going after. And, a lot of that has been drawn from my love for Apple products and like how every Apple product talking to each other is like a seamless experience. Obviously, we're
Right.
not there yet, but the idea is to create an ecosystem of products and really build a moat around the products that you're building.
See, I didn't even realize that was your approach, and I mentioned that earlier, so I set it up and you knocked it out. I love it. Amazing. Final question. Looking to the future, how do you anticipate the landscape of crypto security evolving? You've talked about your goal and the roadmap for Wallet Guard that fits in kind of a larger cybersecurity, online security, crypto security ecosystem as well.
Mhm.
And so I'm just wondering because one of my kind of pet product projects that I'm focused on now is the role of identity, the role of wallets for identity, et cetera. So any kind of, if you're kind of reading the tea leaves for crypto security and identity, how do you anticipate the landscape evolving?
Yeah, I think the ZK is becoming popular is going to be really interesting and really fascinating because like the
And
idea of zero.
define that for folks who don't know.
Oh yeah,
ZK
so
per.
ZK is like zero knowledge, right? So the idea is like here's like a very simple example is like you have an ID and it doesn't have to show your date of birth, but it can prove you're 21, right?
Hmm.
So if I say and I have this credential, it can prove I'm 21, but it doesn't have to show you my date of birth. So it's like the whole principle that I can prove something to you without you necessarily needing to see the full credential or something like that. So I think it's fascinating because zero knowledge is going to do a lot for, security and like the privacy principles of it. Like even
Hmm.
before I think the security principles is like the whole aspect of privacy principles that get applied with like ZK and stuff like that. So I think that is kind of where I see identities moving is like ZK DIDs, like decentralized identities. I don't know how it's going to be done yet because I think there's a lot of
Right.
nuances to every different mechanism for DIDs. I've heard these, which is decentralized identities, But these decentralized identities I hear about, like there's so many different, like, I guess, mechanisms to enable them, that each of them have their own constraints, right? So like
Mm,
and so I'm curious to see like who does it right, because I think it's definitely going to be something with ZK and like zero knowledge and privacy preservation. I'm just not too sure on like who's going to hit it out of the park yet, because I think it's a very, very crucial and important thing, but I don't think it's an easily solved problem either, because it's like, how do you reissue credentials? Who is the validator
mm-hmm.
to issue credentials in the first place? Is there a level of centralization? Is it a decentralized process? How do I get reissued? And those are just all questions that are extremely difficult to answer.
I'm excited for the future, most notably because you're in it, and my money's on you. Actually, I'm not really a betting woman, which is hard for people to believe given the work that I do. I'm actually highly risk averse. So you had me at security. I need you to come and talk to my students about this too. So I'm going to have my people call your people. Let folks know how they can learn more about you and your work and Wallet Guard. And of course, we will share all of this in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. So best way to learn about us is you can visit our website, walletguard.app. Outside of that, we're really big on Twitter. We do a lot of education and community content writing. So it's at wallet_guard. And if you're looking for me personal, you can just search up Ohm Shah or 0x Ohm, and I'm sure you'll be able to find me.
Outstanding, Om Shah. I'm so happy that Nina and uh, Lisa connected all of us at Crypto for the Culture, and that you answered the call to come on and share your knowledge, your expertise, and your coolness with my audience. It's the first, but it won't be the last. Om Shah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.